Aloha and welcome to Coffee Without Milk, a podcast presented by Maui Institute for Modern Music and Ebb and Flow Arts. More information about upcoming concerts, events, and educational opportunities can be found at www.ebbandflowarts.org.
Good morning, good afternoon, Loli, and for our guest, it's evening already. Oh, okay. I'm Loli Frog, and this is Dr. Friedrich Dietrich at your service. We would like to introduce, first of all, Peter Swansea, who is our technical producer, videographer. He also is a composer and does a lot of creative work in photography and creates web pages, constructs them and builds them. It's a lot of things he does, indeed. And we're especially very happy to be joined by William Anderson, the composer and guitarist and concert impresario and organizer and really ambassador for modern music all over the world. And we look forward to hearing about his recent travels. Indeed, Loli. And now we must explain the title of these podcasts. Coffee Without Milk. You see, suppose I am the customer in a restaurant, Loli, okay? Let's do it that way. All right. Waiter, yes. Waiter, come over here, please. Yes, I'm here. Waiter, would you please get me a cup of coffee? Yes, sure. But without cream, no cream. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We don't have cream. Would you prefer coffee without milk? Very funny, very funny. Good one, waiter. You'll get a big tip from me. That's excellent. Well, anyway, so that explains the title, that we are in a conundrum now with the coronavirus, the corona conundrum, which allows us to do what we like. We are very privileged to stay at home, be able to work at home. Yes, I love to work at home on my lily pad. And yes, we are privileged to be at home, and it's lovely, but we don't have that option, do we, Loli, of not doing something we may not want to do. And that puts us in a strange bind these days, doesn't it? It does, indeed. In any case, Loli, we would like to introduce William Anderson. And also that fellow back there has a mask on. We don't, as puppets, we don't need masks. There's no transmission puppet to puppet. And actually no transmission puppet to human. But there could be transmission human to puppet. Aha. Well, let's get on with it and welcome our wonderful guest from all the way from Mount Vernon, New York, Mr. William Anderson.
Thank you, Kermit and Dietrich. Thank you for the lovely introductions. And we're having Joan Forsyth is with us for a bit too.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good
You know
to see
Peter
you.
Swansea? Peter Swansea is our technical producer.
He's
Ah,
producing the podcast.
wonderful.
Yeah, yes. So, well, Bill, you just told us, for example, that you've had snow, which is
Yes.
unbelievable.
It was snowing. Well, yesterday up in Vermont, it snowed quite a bit. And then, so I'm not so surprised that it snowed here, but we are quite a bit further south. And yeah, the weather's a little bit crazy. And, you know, the animals are doing funny things now. And the weather might be doing funny things. Maybe the whole planet is behaving strangely in reaction to our quickly changing our habits with regard to everything we do and all of our usual energy consumption and so on. But thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast. And I think that, the coffee without milk, it's an interesting concept. They don't have coffee without milk. They have coffee without milk. They don't have coffee without cream.
Right. We're really honored to have you here, Bill. Going through your biography, man, you just must have so many amazing stories, the composers you've worked with, the performances, the places you've been, and all the things you've done. So we welcome you at any point to regale us with some story or another from your exploits and your endeavors. And I think that for the most part, Robert, who's worked with you quite a bit in the past and is, really familiar with all the things you've done, he's going to kind of smooth things over and keep this moving and let me know when we need to listen or watch something. And should be a lot of fun today. So thanks a lot for joining us. And I'm honored to be a part of this today.
It's an honor for me as well. Thank you, Peter. So, well, I just want to say that I'm very excited about, I'm going to take this opportunity to mention a project that Joan and I are involved with. We're going to record Robert Pollock's romance fantasy. And I have to say, I've told Robert this, mano a mano, but I'm very excited about his music, and this piece in particular, Romance Fantasy for Guitar and Piano, it's really special. And we did it last fall in California, and we're really looking forward to getting it recorded, and it'll be one of the final pieces to complete an all Robert Pollock CD, which I think is a very important thing to do. And so Joan and I sitting down here together, we can use this opportunity to sort of firm up our commitment to getting this done. We know
you want me to get the score? Do you want me to get the score?
You get the score. We know the piece inside and out, and it'll be quick. We'll be able to get it back on our fingers and rehearse it and put it together. Recording it will be tricky because of the syncopations, but I'm very excited about doing it. It's such a wonderful piece. And so Maui doesn't know, perhaps Maui does know, but we need to let Maui know that there's a very important composer in Maui, Robert Pollock. And we're very grateful for everything you do there with Ebb and Flow and Coffee Without Milk. Promoting contemporary music is really very special. And we want to talk about other things as well, like our friend Dina Koston and the recording you made of her duo piano piece. And I can talk about my recent travels. Last summer, Joan and I were both in Austria and Germany for music festivals, and we're working with some very interesting people there.
And we played the Romance Fantasy in Poland.
Right, we played it in Poland. That was a couple years ago. That was
last fall.
No, it was a year ago last fall.
Yeah, it goes.
A year ago last fall. The time just flies by. And we're lucky that we're able to do some really wonderful music in the meantime as time just flies by. And I also want to mention there are a couple important American composers who recently passed away. Most recently Charles Warren, and then before that Mario Davidovsky, and I had the privilege of working with both of them quite a bit, and very interesting composers, very, very important composers. And
tell us some memories of the encounters with them.
Yes, exactly. I have stories. They don't always come to me, but they're interesting characters. And one of the things that I can mention is that Mario Davidovsky was at Harvard. He led a charmed life, don't you think? I mean, he got all the great jobs, and he was commissioned by everyone. And then I commissioned him with Cygnus to write for Cygnus with Elizabeth Farnham, soprano. He wrote 3 Ladino songs. And in the end, they were commissioned by the Library of Congress, and they got their first performance there in 2012. But he was at Harvard, And he was very frustrated because Harvard was ending all of the Western musical emphasis that they usually had. Harvard is sort of moving in a different direction, so orchestras are not so interesting to them anymore. And Mario was frustrated by this. Musicologists were taking over, and a certain old-fashioned idea about music was being it was going away. It was being overridden by other things, and now this is happening at other places too. So I just heard from some people in Vancouver that the University of British Columbia, they want to phase out their orchestra. They don't want to have an orchestra anymore. It's too I don't know.
Traditional.
Wow. So are they shifting the focus to be more on modern, contemporary, or academic, or world music, or where is it kind of world music? Yeah.
Ethnomusicology.
Sure.
Research into world music and music from different cultures.
Now, to be perfectly honest, if they were getting rid of the orchestra because it's expensive and because it's hard to write really interesting orchestral music that's original and new, that's something I could understand. Orchestras are expensive, and there's a certain core repertoire for orchestras that's terribly important. But in a university, chamber music is you can really make all your points with that. The chamber music repertoire is less expensive to produce. And,
sure, yeah, it's a lot more lightweight.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of funny things happening in the music world right now. So in the United States, we're really lucky to have the minimalists building an audience for contemporary music. And in Europe, everything, noise is very, very popular in Europe right now. And I've been following all of this by attending occasionally, whenever I can, the International Society for Contemporary Music World Music Days. And the Roger Shapiro Fund for New Music, which was founded by Dina Koston, which I'm involved with very much. We started an ISCM section. And so we're able to nominate works for inclusion in the ISCM World Music Days. And the last festival was scheduled to happen around this time in the Netherlands. In New Zealand.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Joan really wanted to go, but the trip was going to be kind of expensive. And it was canceled because of the virus, very sadly. And so the Roger Shapiro Fund and our ISCM unit, which we call ISCM Mid-Atlantic, we had two composers that were slated to be represented, Anna Wiesner and Alice Shields. Robert, did you ever get to know Alice Shields when you were back east?
Not very much. The name is very familiar, and some of her works are familiar to me.
But she was a Columbia Princeton person, and she was you can find her photographed with Usachevsky and Babbitt and Davidovsky in the Prentice. Peter, there's this building in Harlem near Columbia University on 125th Street. I went there once. It's a room filled with really amazingly awkward and clunky large metal.
We know the building well, those photos, right, Peter?
Oh, are you talking about the RCA Mark II synthesizer building? Or
right.
No, the Columbia Princeton Tape Music, or whatever they call it now?
Columbia Princeton. Yeah,
I've been there before, yeah.
It's in a building called Prentice. So Alice was selected for that, Alice Shields. Anna Wiesner.
Familiar, Peter, with Alice Shields' work? Haven't you brought her up?
Not really familiar though. I mean, just with her name and in terms of her name and historically, but that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Well, I will send you some links.
Yeah, that would be great.
She's doing interesting work. The other composer was selected was Anna Wiesner. She's at the University of Pennsylvania, and she wrote a really amazing piece for Cygnus and soprano. We just recorded it with Tony Arnold, and it won an American Academy of Arts and Letters award, the Virgil Thompson Award for vocal music. Huge award. and quite deservedly so. She has a absolutely unique voice. So Anna Wiesner is an interesting person to watch. So ISCM has these World Music Days, and they happen in a different city all over the world. There's going to be one in Shanghai, which should be really interesting. And these,
when is
these
that?
places, pardon? I think it's next year.
Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, as you begin to see, the bill is maybe an ambassador for new music as president of Roger Shapiro Fund, or a leading role in that fund. You've been able to travel to all of these international events, and every time we see you on Facebook, you're in a different country and doing all great work. You know, a natural born diplomat. And someone who really has been to Hawaii under our auspices probably 5 times. And Joan, you've been with us as well. Joan is a wonderful pianist, and she teaches at Bennington College and the 3rd Street Settlement House. And so probably 5 times. Bill was participated in our 2nd concert of Ebb and Flow Arts, with the 2nd ever concert.
Oh, wow.
There were 2 really. There was one in Honolulu and one on Maui with the cellist Yohei Asaoka. Is he still active? Are you in touch with him?
I've lost touch with him. I don't know.
And he would be in Japan. He would be living in, So, so it was a guitar cello recital. And interestingly, this came up again because at that time we discussed with Yohei some of the multimedia work we're involved with, and he suggested we look up a piece by Toru Takemitsu that is multimedia in nature. And you know what his title is? Corona.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yes.
Robert, Corona, was that the one that we performed? I think I was like on some percussion. We had a visual image projected, and it was like a wheel, right? The score is circular somehow.
Yes. And that turns out to be only part of the piece. But we did enact that soon after, or not that soon after, but Yohei sent me this, at least a fragment of the score. Apparently isn't published anymore, but, and based on that, we were able to do a multimedia piece. However, it turns out that Adam Tendler has performed maybe the full piece with piano. It goes on about 13 minutes or so. So that it just came up again for that reason. And there is apparently a video of his performance, so we may eventually show that. After all, it's a total coincidence, but the title, there's something.
Are we talking about this score
yes.
here? Is this what we're looking at? Okay, so
yes.
So somehow we didn't play the full score. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
We only played a part of it. Only the first half somehow. The inner layers.
The left upper quadrant.
I was gonna say I remember a circle, but I think that we kind of made the video. We might have kind of interpreted it or rearranged it based on the concept, I think, when we created our performance of it.
Yes.
So.
But all of that is to say that getting back to Bill's participation here, the last time was with the Vox and Plux. And over the years, you've managed to coordinate also international guitar activity and the participation in the ISCM events, and then your many travels to Europe. So it's a truly remarkable career. And we all got started back in the early 80s or mid 80s in New Jersey. So it's
with your Composers Guild of New Jersey was one of the first things I did one of the first gigs was with your group organization, the Composers Guild of New Jersey, and it was so wonderful to have the chance to go down to Ship Bottom and and other interesting places all over the state.
Yes, there were many. The group was at that time already Cygnus, wasn't it?
Well, we had a different name, but it was sort of the same principle. Cygnus Ensemble is plucked strings, winds, and bowed strings. And in fact, Dina Koston wrote a quartet for us called Quartet for Strings Bowed and Plucked. She left out the winds. But Cygnus has a number of really important pieces. One of them is Robert Pollock's signature piece, which is a little joke. Something that I wouldn't expect anything less from you. Signature piece spelled CYG. It's a really wonderful piece, and so that should be on our All Pollock album when we put it all together.
Well, you've already recorded that one.
Yeah.
So that's great. That's an album you did several years ago with pieces for the whole ensemble. So that's flute, oboe, violoncello, and 2 guitars, sometimes switching to mandolin and banjo. And yeah. And we've always tried to get you out here, but it's never worked. However, we did tour with you to Russia and to Holland and Denmark.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So some things happen. How are you now adjusting? You're able to stay at home. You can teach from home, Joan, pretty much.
We're finishing the school year, it has its ups and downs. I think it's really hard for the college students, a lot of them, especially the international students. They were basically, told they had to leave campus on pretty short notice. They allowed a small group of about 100 to stay up there, but a lot of them ended up staying with friends or staying, and of course, thinking that they were going to stay with their friends for about 4 weeks, and it's a lot longer than that. So you can imagine how that is going.
But let's mention some of the silver linings. One example that Joan told me, that there was a young student who was home sequestered, and the father was in the room when the lesson was taking place, and the child was a different child with the father present. So this is one of the things that happens when you just shake things up a little bit. And so that child started to learn and focus better.
Yeah, what's happened with my younger students, I also teach at the 3rd Street Music School Settlement in New York City, which is the oldest community music school in the United States. And we were actually celebrating our 125th anniversary this year, and we had all of these marvelous events planned that have all been canceled, or we did hold our gala, which was supposed to be at the Plaza online with Cindy Lauper and Jason Mraz, and it was fun, but not the same, but fun.
No.
But anyway, what I see with these younger young people is that they have space, they have time. All of a sudden, their playing is growing and maturing because they have time to think and not be so hectic and not running in 100 different places.
So there's another.
Yeah. Could this
another
be?
example.
Could it be the new normal?
I don't know. I wouldn't be sad about it for them. For that age group, it's working for me.
Well, I've often heard Joan lament that her students are kept too busy. That sometimes parents think that the kids have to be involved with this and that and sports and music, and it's too much. It's enough with having to do their homework and one other thing, and let it be piano. But some people are interested in sports. I understand that, but
let it be guitar.
Let it be guitar.
Well, they have the same choices that we all have. It's like we have this smorgasbord of things to do, and it's choosing and realizing that maybe it might be better to prune a few things.
Well,
It's
the
hard
other
to
thing
give
that
music lessons remotely, though, isn't it? I'm sorry to interrupt, but because of the even just that slight kind of delay, that's one issue that we've always had, is that it's hard to coordinate. I think that in terms of practice, when we have time to develop our discipline for practice, that's really helpful. At least it has been for me. But I read the headline of an article from Vice yesterday. It said, "What to do when time is meaningless and there are endless chores." And I thought that's really where it's come down to. The first month, I was really excited to spend so much time with my discipline, with composition, with art. And now I find myself, I'm taking apart beds and putting them back together to make them an inch higher or something, just to do something, that's not practice or something different, all little things. And the laundry is endless,
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of kids are managing well. My daughter at home, I mean, she's just a whirlwind. So she's into horses, she's into music, she's into dance, she's into art. So now the house is all of those things for her. She does everything at home. And so every part of the house has been transformed away from my personal spaces of recreation to her self-development, her studios everywhere. So there's art here, there's a dance bar here, there's a piano here, and she's just, she just goes from station to station kind of, but don't let me stand in her way. Oh, well, the horse stays outside, but yeah. The horse is actually somewhere else entirely now. So yeah, we don't have to worry about it.
I imagine the horse near Makawao.
You are very correct, sir. Yeah, we're right there, right in the heart of Makawao town. So
that's where I would picture a horse. Yeah, nice.
You've been here before. You've played here. You've played actually at her school at Seabury Hall, I believe. You've played at the Performing Arts Center there. So
that's a lovely venue.
It's a great place. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it fits the aesthetic of this environment.
Totally.
Great little theater.
So for our listeners, Makawao is it looks like a cowboy town. It looks like it could be in Wyoming. It's got that kind of storefronts that look like a cowboy town.
Oh yeah, something from an old, Western film, and everything around here is cowboys and rolling hills, horses, livestock. Yeah, it's all ranch land around here. Great little place. Now, where are you? So you're based in New York City or just outside of the city? Remind me again where.
We're just outside of the city. Bill works at Sarah Lawrence College, and so we're very close to Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, yes, fantastic. We're in Mount Vernon, New York.
Got it.
It's just north of the Bronx.
Yeah, we border on the Bronx. We're a few blocks in the Bronx, really. We could walk there.
The Bronx is amazing. I haven't been to New York in probably 15 years, but I worked with a composer who lived up near the Cloisters, and so we would pop over to the Bronx all the time. So I was working with a composer named Kevin James, and I was one of his kind of education interns. And we were doing work in Brooklyn and up in the Bronx as well. And I never got further north in the Bronx, didn't have a car, and I was a little scared to go too far from the city. I mean, when you're living in Manhattan and you're 20 years old or whatever, that's it. That's the boundaries of the world are Manhattan Island, basically. So.
Right.
The Bronx is a lot scarier than Westchester.
Well,
this is pretty suburban.
But Joan and I both lived in Washington Heights. So in the 90s.
In the Dinkins era, yeah.
And during the Dinkins administration. And remember, that was the crack epidemic. And so Washington Heights was a dicey place then. And my colleague, Orrin Fader, guitarist extraordinaire,
who's been here.
He's been to Maui. He used to say, Bill, your neighborhood's really nice and everything, but that's not the city. So he was being a snob, because even though Washington Heights is on the island of Manhattan, it feels more like the Bronx. So when people come from Upper West Side to Washington Heights, it's like, that's not the city. No, that's not. I hope that's changed.
The Heights was sort. Did you ever didn't Lin-Manuel Miranda write a Broadway musical? Yeah, The Heights. Yeah, and it was all real kind of Spanish and like Dominican and South American or Central American,
Very
I guess more.
So. Yeah.
Yeah.
During the 90s, Before that, it was a Jewish neighborhood.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
I guess so. Yeah. My father's friend's mother lived up there, and I stayed at her place. Yeah. So
what else is?
Did you? Yeah. Did you study, Peter, in New York? Study composition? Who was your composition teacher?
My composition teacher when I was in New York, I was working with a man named Kevin James, and he was doing mostly chamber music and a little bit of. He wrote for vocalists. He was doing. I'm trying to remember because I don't. His wife was working at the 92nd Street Y, I think, and they also did some concert promotion. He was mostly a music educator, and he did a thing called the Portraits Project, which was a homeless outreach project where he and a group of percussionists would go to various shelters, mostly in Brooklyn, and they would teach music to kids on Saturdays. It was an effort organized with the Police Athletic League, and so that was how I joined up with them. In terms of studying composition with them, we did that for maybe a lesson a week, and the rest of the time was dedicated to developing his educational curriculum. And then before that, I'd been living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I went to New York just to do an internship for a school year. And then unfortunately, my school, my liberal arts college where I went to school, closed down. So I'm happy I still have the transcript. But other than that, it doesn't exist. So that was the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. And then it folded. I think after the 2008 financial crisis, that kind of just turned things around for them. Yeah. But most of the work that I do musically is with electronic music. So when you start talking about, the Tape Music Center or the Computer Music Center now at Columbia Princeton, that's where I really light up. When you were talking about Mario Davidovsky and Charles Wernin, it's their electronic work that really, I find to be so important historically. So learning that you've worked with both those individuals and with many more, to me was, that was a hot button issue for me when I was reading about your work. So it excited me.
So Peter has been doing here a lecture in the public libraries on the history of electronic music, slide and audio presentation. And of course, we use the electronic music in our Music of the Spheres programs. And we've had a recent breakthrough until the virus hit. We were due to present this show, which comprises the in-house effects of the planetarium, which are incredible, and visual images created by Hawaii-based artists that are then projected all in a full dome film format. We've made a breakthrough at the Maui Ocean Center. Did you ever go to the aquarium when you were here?
No.
Well, when you're coming from Kahului, driving toward Kihei, and then you can either go right toward Lahaina or left toward
right.
Kihei. Is that where it is?
Yes.
Okay. I know where it is, but I've never been there.
Never been. So even without the dome, it's quite a aquarium, very impressive. But they constructed about maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago a state-of-the-art 3D planetarium.
My.
And we were, through persistence over several months really, and creating a whole new press kit for our program, several meetings, phone calls, spontaneous stop-ins and so forth. We finally broke through. It is a for-profit venture, but they agreed to allow us as part of their outreach to the community policy, they agreed to allow us a Music of the Spheres program. So we would have several electronic pieces, including one we took Charles Warren's Times Encomium, part one or part two.
I think it was part two.
Part two.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And combined that with visual artwork by a Maui-based artist, Martha Woodbury. And now Peter's able to do these full dome files, which are enormous, but that enabled us to project the images of Martha Woodbury during the playback of the Charles Warren piece. This was done in the Imaloa Planetarium in Hilo.
So is it like you're using the light from the planetarium to project images?
It's like kind of an immersive video environment. So they have like special projectors, and you create video that is meant to kind of be mapped all around the dome. But acoustically, they're super cool spaces too. So we had Iggy Jang come and perform live in the dome for one of the works that we did with what was that, Robert? Takuma Ito's work.
Yeah, stargazing.
Stargazing.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so
the Maui dome is interesting because it's all hard surface walls, and I mean the dome is a hard surface. It's enclosed, whereas at other planetarium it's kind of dappled, or I don't know how you'd say, but it's got little holes in it to allow, anyway, so when they project onto it, but it's not as acoustically live. But the dome on Maui is so acoustically live that if you're standing anywhere in the venue and you speak at more than a whisper, it just sounds like somebody's right in your ear. That, like when you're on the playground as a kid and there's that reflective dish and you can speak into it and you can hear somebody across the room. So it has that effect. So we're really excited about doing a concert there. And I think that to combine acoustic and electronic music there would be fantastic, because it would be really the best use of that space. So we're exploring once we get our feet in the door with this project, then hopefully we'll do a whole lot more there in the future.
Yeah. And the technical director there is Matthew Lubke. He has been showing one 15-minute demo film for a year now.
It must be driving him crazy.
Several hundred times, film about humpback whales.
Which is very good. I mean, it's a super beautiful film, really well done.
So you put on these pretty elaborate glasses, and experience it. So our Music of the Spheres often was able to engage the directors of the planetarium to create, kind of choreograph the electronic pieces we wanted to have played back. So they would use these directors of the planetarium would use their in-house effects that are so incredible and powerful, and the Earth floating before you could practically touch it, and all of those amazing effects.
I do the crown piece, Vox Balina.
Yeah, we did a piece. It is called Earth, isn't it, Chevsky? It's for clay pots. A narrator.
Oh, Frederick Chevsky.
Yeah.
To the Earth, maybe.
To the Earth, maybe. To the
Was
Earth.
that with Paul Carroll?
That's
came
right.
And played that? Yeah.
So Paul Carroll and in the dome, they projected the Earth in 3D. As the name of it's invoked, and all sorts of alignments. And we used to say the director over there had a ooh-ah machine, because anytime he turned a dial at the right moment, the whole audience would go, ooh, which blocked out this music temporarily. That was the only drawback.
That's better than having everybody walk out, I would.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've had that too.
Yeah.
No,
well, what you're doing in Maui to build an audience for music is really impressive to me, and what you did a great job in New Jersey also. It's not easy, and what's interesting is that you don't do it by your music is it's not like you're going in the minimalist direction because the minimalist has been so successful, and I love the minimalists and I'm grateful to them, but you're continuing with your own vision. And you're finding a way of making people, to draw people in and develop a true love and an appreciation for what you're doing. And this is, I think, something that we need to do better. We have to create a space in the United States is so oriented toward pop culture, and in the 60s and 70s there was this brief moment, a little blip when people wanted to try to create a space for all kinds of music and all kinds of art, and then it got crowded out, and part of it was overreach, I suppose. Like people like Milton Babbitt, he was just too crazy. His music, he softened at the end. The piece he wrote for Cygnus, Swan Song #1, he finally, it's very diatonic. He realized that he didn't have to avoid the diatonic harmonies. But yeah, so the modernists drove people away. They overreached a little bit, but nevertheless, what we need to keep doing is create a space for music that's not trying to pander.
Yes,
Well, I think,
absolutely.
you know, some of it is also that our society is so dependent on the movement of money, as we've kind of found out during this pandemic crisis. When the money stops moving, you know, what do we all do? So in terms of what's viable for commercial success musically, you know, it's, you know, music for television, music for film. Concerts, I think, are really important, but you know, everything is so organized around these festivals with, and I'm not talking about modern music or any classical music or orchestral or chamber music festivals. I mean like rock concert and like hip hop festivals that have 100,000 people, you know, over 4 days of just nonstop music. And all of that is so manipulated by the music industry, but the music industry has almost completely left modern music behind. It's kind of like, well, you guys just go and starve in your own way over there, and we'll focus on how we're going to just keep, you know, printing money over here with our concerts and what's appealing. But I think that it's because of the commercialization that classical and modern academic, any kind of music that's not pop music, just kind of lives in the shadow, you know. And it's hard to find it unless you know where to look sometimes, even with the internet being so full of information. Unless you start looking, or you have a, you know, a helpful teacher, it might go unnoticed.
Yeah, sadly, it's true. And I've begun to consider the possibility that our neglect here in the United States is not entirely bad, because anything that gets done has to be done with an overwhelming sense of mission and deep desire and fire in the belly to get it done, because there's no money in it.
You have to really want it. It has to be your driving passion. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Whereas in Europe, the composers have money thrown at them, and it's really important to support artists. And you know, looking at what happens here in the United States, you're almost tempted to say, well, it's really important to neglect artists, because look what we do, even in our state of neglect.
Right.
But no, what the Roger Shapiro Fund is about to do is to try to fund some things that wouldn't otherwise get funded. And
you've been doing that all along, yeah. And
true.
That was founded by Dina Koston and her husband, Roger Shapiro, the psychiatrist, doctor.
Right.
Yes.
Well, Roger had predeceased Dina by some years. I knew Roger, and he had some health problems, and there are actually two Roger Shapiro funds. One is held by the Library of Congress, because they were both going to bequeath their funds to the Library of Congress, which supported Dina's music. And they for a period, they were doing some very ambitious work, and they still do. I like what they're doing now. It's not quite as laser focused on the, you know, Carter. They did a lot of Carter, and Dina's fund was not given to the Library of Congress in the end, but she decided to make an independent foundation. And yeah, we're trying to fund contemporary music that's there's so much that music can do. This is something that Milton Babbitt used to speak about, you know, says we want music to do everything it can do. And we don't know what it can do, because we're all working on it. And let's see what pleasant surprises await us when we try to see what it can do. You know?
It's like when a young composer tries to find their voice, the only way to express their style is to kind of let go of the obsession of trying to find who they are and just create, honestly, just to make whatever and make it as bad and weird as possible. And then out of that filter kind of what works. because we don't really know where we're going yet. We just have to keep trying it and seeing, and the process by which we select what we like is the process naturally that we're finding our voice, finding our style. I was curious, I'm looking at the Roger Shapiro Fund and some recent projects. I was curious about the Jonathan, you pronounce his last name Daw, Jonathan Daw?
Yes.
Glass harmonica. What was the process like to get that project going, and what was your experience with that?
That's another one of our recording projects that we are currently working on.
After we record Robert's piano and guitar piece, we'll do some of the glass harmonica. There were some conversations that I had with Maestro Daw. Before the Roger Shapiro Fund existed, Cygnus commissioned Jonathan Daw's first Fractal Baroque opera. So Daw does Fractal Baroque. And in fact, we both met Mandelbrot through Charles Warren, because Charles Warren befriended the great fractal pioneer, Benoit Mandelbrot. And he came to a concert that I produced, Warren's 65th birthday concert. So Daw's music is fractal. And at one point he came up with this beautiful, he said he was going in a new direction. He's doing fractalized Philip Glass. So I said, you should call it glass harmonica.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now
it gets worse and worse.
No, I love it. This is great. I want to hear much more.
Well, so Philip Glass, Joan knows Philip Glass and has worked with him. And he came to one of the concerts that Joan produced with her students on Pier 1.
Yes, a concert of his etudes.
Oh, excellent.
And he played one of the etudes, and then these young New York high school music students played the other etudes.
Were they just piano etudes, or did he write like violin and clarinet?
He has 12, a book of 12 etudes for piano.
Oh, yeah.
And they're quite wonderful.
Yeah, he's nice, and he's the minimalist we're all talking about, isn't he?
Well, what's funny is like my father is getting involved with concert production too in central Pennsylvania. I grew up near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he's on the board of Market Square Concerts. It was something that my mother did before she died in 2015, and my father took it over and does an annual concert in memory of my mother. And they had the Third Coast Percussion a few months ago. It was last fall, and I went. And Third Coast Percussion said, we're doing a piece by the most famous, amazing composer, Philip Glass. And so the young musicians, their go-to famous composer is Philip Glass. And I was kind of surprised because that's not my world, but if I could just recall a conversation I had with Yehudi Weiner. Yehudi was the president of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and I produced a concert of his at the Third Street Music School in February, right before the pandemic started. We sneaked this concert through, and I was talking with Yehudi about Philip Glass, and he was being very coy because he knew I was giving him, I was sort of tossing him a lob and giving him an opportunity to say something snide about Philip Glass. But he didn't. He said, Philip Glass is arguably the most successful opera composer in the history of Western music. Now, in terms of his collaborations and the quality of the people, Wilson and Childs, there's something to be said for that. And then Yehudi also said that he attended some of the operas and he was absolutely enchanted by the entirety of the production. And then from there, we went on to sort of have a few little complaints about some of the harmonic schemes because we're not always convinced by his harmonic language. But it's like out of all the composers who would become a superstar, I never imagined it would be Philip Glass. But there you go. And so what a different world we're in.
It's so palatable in a sense, and I'm only saying that from the point of view of from people who are only familiar with pop music, and this is not to disparage Philip Glass in any way, but you know, when you have just repetitive minor thirds and major thirds, there's definitely something hypnotic about it. And I think that his music lends itself really effectively to a lot of films. And I think it kind of, when people think of modern music, at least they have Philip Glass they can relate to. And hopefully Philip Glass is the door through which that they can access, you know, all the other work, at least from the time period, you know, the early minimalists, and maybe they'll keep reaching further, and maybe they'll find more, and maybe they'll discover something else, you know, by way of Philip Glass. He might be sort of the megaphone that reaches them, but there's, you know, I would hope that
They might listen to John Adams.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm grateful to Philip Glass, and yeah, I agree. We have to look at it that way. That this is it's opening doors for people. People will explore and get excited about music by living. Oh, well, I have a student who was having dinner with a composer from Germany, and he said he went to the Metropolitan Opera. He was visiting New York. He went to the Metropolitan. He was just astonished that thousands of people were watching an opera by a living composer. And he said in Germany, they expect that their music is just so specialized that, you know, they'll get 15 people and they'll be happy if you know, they get a handful of people to come and listen. This is the difference between Europe and New York right now, and well, in the United States in general, because we really do have a lot of excitement about contemporary music. It's so, the difference between the European scene and the U.S. scene, it's very striking.
So you were saying that in Germany, for example, a composer who gets an audience of 15, that would be maybe like a feather in their cap, because their music is so unique that it's only palatable to a very select group of intellectual people who could appreciate it.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the way it was back in the bad old days when Robert and I got started out with we worked with a guy, the crazy Frenchman, Jacques Monod. I heard that he was living in a cave in France somewhere, but I think that it might have been rumors of his living in a cage may have been exaggerated. And
in a cave or a cage?
In a cave.
Okay.
Jacques Monod had the New York Guild of Composers, and
Right.
sometimes he would just try to get the word out that there was going to be a beautiful reception, and everyone would come for the reception.
Right. Yeah, nobody wants the wedding. They just want to drink afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, there were some successes with the New York Guild every once in a while, large turnouts. But normally it was 50 to 100 people, and the same people.
Yeah.
The composers and some performers.
Well, composers do make a great audience, you know. We love to pick apart other people's work.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. For me, the most contrasted experience was years ago. We were in Russia with it was with sickness maybe, and let's see, trying to remember. Jo Spoor, was he the composer from Holland? That may have been a different trip, but in any case, yeah, no, it was Cygnus, and you performed at the big hall, and the huge turnout and massive receptions and all of that. And then because of a commitment back east, I eventually got back to New York to perform a two-piano recital at NYU. And there were maybe 30 people in the audience.
That's pretty good.
But that's this really gray sort of reception. That is the audience applause. And then afterward, a reception with popcorn and diet ginger ale or something. You know, it was horrible, the contrast. Now that doesn't reflect what you're talking about now, which is that you've got these apparently big turnouts for contemporary music. You yourself draw well when you're Cygnus. You've really cultivated that audience development part of your work.
Not as well as you have.
Well, you know, our swan song, so to speak, was also in February in Honolulu, a new site, the Honolulu, the Lutheran Church of Honolulu, and it has a beautiful piano, which was donated, a Steinway Grand, concert grant, good acoustics, and we did draw well for an absolutely uncompromising program, as you say. So we haven't been able, we haven't really let up on that. Now there may be more accessible or less accessible programs, but in general, the programming of that concert was fairly typical. We did Elliott Carter, for example, his last piece, Epigrams. You may have run across that.
No, I haven't.
Violoncello and piano.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the cellist, who's from Korea, which fit into the partially Korean theme of the concert. We had a number of pieces that had been involved in that. The cellist had learned Lee Sang-yoon's Glissé for solo cello. It's something like 15 minutes of the really most challenging technically and experimental in the predominance of glissés, for example, but all sorts of other things, turning the cello into a Korean ancient instrument, and he had played this cello, Sung Chang had played it something like 6 times already and had done his dissertation on the piece. So he knew it inside out. It was a wonderful performance. But again, if you know Lee Sang-yoon's music, it's very challenging for the listener. At least
I quite like it. I really like it.
Me too.
Yeah.
No, it's wonderful, that piece and all. Anyway, that was illustrative of the programming, and so at least we ended, you know, with the sort of integrity that we started. By ended, the meaning is really where do we go from here? And none of us know, of course, but it seems to me that there'll have to be at chamber music concerts spatial distancing if they're live. There have to be all sorts of precautions taken, and probably mask wearing and disinfectants but
maybe the facilities will have to make ultraviolet air handlers, because the ultraviolet light can kill the viruses, and so pass the air through these special air handlers that kill the viruses.
All sorts of new industries are cropping up now, mask making. Yeah.
I think that's just big mask making lobby talking, Robert. I have to be careful what I say. If we post this on YouTube, we don't want to get flagged for,
right. Well,
for any conspiracy theories.
We've already done enough to be immediately removed, but never mind. We'll try it anyway. We're going to post these, Bill and Joan, with your permission. We'll post these and soon and see what happens. But
I wanted to talk about the palatability of music. We were talking about Lee Sang-yoon, and there's a huge spectrum there, because there's a spectrum of harmonic palatability, and there's also a spectrum of just when you're talking about how noise is popular in Europe. I've been to a lot of noise concerts, and I helped a composer in New York actually in the early 2000s named Jens Brand set up a piece that was just motors and styrofoam, and it was just hung all throughout the room, and using some kind of a voltage controller, he would just create all this sound with the motors and the styrofoam, and people could not get up and get out of there fast enough as soon as it began.
Yeah.
It was, and he had video to accompany it, and the video was just like a static image of a chair or just things that were completely unrelated. And that was part of what he built into the aesthetic of that experience, is he wanted it to be really hard for people to handle. And so even the spectrum of noise has a huge spectrum. There's noise that's kind of the Lamont Young, hold a note for 24 hours kind of spectrum, or then there's just the full-on alarming sounds that are so denatured and remove you from the experiences of your life. Even like Xenakis and his electronic music is really hard for, I would say, most people to approach, without just digging in and like learning about the process and what it took to create it. So sometimes for me, the most interesting part about music is the process behind it. And sometimes you can hear it in the result, but sometimes you can't, like John Cage, for example. Sometimes a brilliant process with, I'll be one of the first to admit it maybe, but a terrible result sometimes. It shouldn't be there, but the process is what's interesting. And so the whole range, there's so much that people may approach about music, but the spectrum of noise, consonance, dissonance, we got to think of a good name for the album that we're doing, the homage to you, Robert. Not we, but you, Bill, and the ensemble. So Robert and I had a great conversation about harmonic language of his compositions, and we talked a lot about diminished chords. So I don't know, maybe we'll work that in, to the title somehow.
That has resonances for me because I know a few places where they pop up, and I understand why. Or at least I've had some hints. I won't say I understand.
What is the why?
I love Robert's harmonic language, especially when he writes for guitar. There's this pentatonic sounds because of the guitar's tuning. But noise is a very complicated subject, and I guess one of the things that John Cage said is that if you don't like it, listen again. And if you still don't like it, listen again. You know that story?
Yeah. Was that
So
one of his?
Tell the whole story. That it vaguely sounds familiar.
That's pretty much all I remember. But he said if you just keep listening and
He's very quotable. I mean, all of his the indeterminacy lectures, his 90 stories or whatever, they're infinitely quotable. There's a lot of great material. You've done some work based on poetry too. Is that right, Bill? I saw something about Ezra Pound or James Joyce somewhere in a project archive.
Yes. Well, last summer, the reason I was in Salzburg was because I wrote a piece for Bloomsday in Salzburg. Klaus Auger and his colleague Yvonne Zahner, the guitarist, they put on an annual Bloomsday concert, and so we do the compositions relating to Joyce. And I was teamed up with an Austrian poet, a very young Austrian poet, Johanna Ferner, and she wrote this fascinating poem, which I set. And it was her personal Ulysses. It was, we had a conversation about it. I said, this is a tribute to James Joyce, and it's Bloomsday, June 16. But in the end, it has to be about you, and it's your personal utterance and your poetry. And then I'm going to set that to music. And we were supposed to record it. I was supposed to go to Salzburg in early April. It was canceled because their cellist is in Taiwan and couldn't make it to Europe. So maybe we'll do it in September. But poetry, yes. Juna Barnes is a poet that I recently fell in love with. She's was in Paris between the wars. She was a bit older than Ernest Hemingway, and she makes funny comments about Hemingway, like she treats him like a little brother. Like he's a little. She's a little bit dismissive of Hemingway, who became far more famous than her. But Juna Barnes is a very, very important and underappreciated American poet. What a very bizarre. I urge everyone to check her stuff out. And then I did a set of settings of her, a cycle of settings of her poetry. We did some
What?
of them in Maui with Foxy
Right.
Club. Yeah. So yes, I'm into poetry. I study poetry and I read poetry criticism. I like reading Harold Bloom, who's really not a very fashionable critic anymore. He's like a nasty old man, and he got busted for sexual harassment. And,
Yeah.
Uh, have you run across William Stafford, the poet?
no, but I'll write the name down.
Okay.
Are you setting some Stafford?
No, but recently it involves our granddaughter Celeste, who had to leave Lewis and Clark because of the coronavirus, as so many college students now are. It's quite a dilemma for everybody, not the least the parents who are paying for these horrendous fees and getting Zoom classes instead.
Yeah, at least
But
you're
in
getting Zoom classes.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
But so anyway, Celeste had to leave, and it turns out that the poet laureate of Oregon, where Lewis and Clark is a Kim Stafford, and he started a collection of poems in response to the COVID-19, the pandemic, with photos. It's online. Incidentally, we're thinking of starting some sort of collection of that kind, commissioning work, for example, from you and Peter and others, in response to the corona situation. But Kim Stafford wrote a beautiful, one poem we saw because it was included in a letter to parents from the president of the college. It was a lovely poem. It talked about the Fauci's Mona Lisa smile. And and then we learned from one of our board members, Lolly Groth, who's also a poet, that Kim, who's a male, teaches at Lewis Clark. Kim's father was even a more famous poet, William Stafford. He was actually poet laureate of the United States.
Wow,
William Stafford. And well, to make a long story short, I received a poem of William Stafford, who taught also at Lewis and Clark. And it's about wandering through the woods and taking this path or that. And then it occurred to me, it's a riff or a reworked or sort of a neoclassical version of Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, and then put them side by side, and they're exactly the same form. That is 4 stanzas, 5 lines each. Now one is the Frost is in rhyme and regular meter, and Stafford is free, and as a result, possibly much more subtle in its quandary that's parallel to what happens in The Road Not Taken, that why he takes a certain path and not another. But it was a fascinating thing to discover. So yes, we love the poets. Now, before we get any further, why don't we play some of the audios, Bill, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You have your piece, Poemus Harmonica, on our latest CD. We have Emil Awad's Fuad that you recorded for us, the solo guitar. We could talk, or you could talk about your trips to Mexico, yet another location you're very familiar with. And then we have the Dina Koston's dialogues that Joan and I recorded here on Maui some years ago, and that's also on it's on this the 20
it's on the
20
BMI.
years.
Yeah.
The most recent one, CD, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the rare Dina Koston recordings, and you're in the company of Leon Fleischer, who recorded 2 of the solo piano pieces for a project that the Roger Shapiro Fund spearheaded with Bridge Records. So you're in good company. Yeah, so we're gonna spin some stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you want to
Yeah.
take a listen to dialogue first and work our way backwards through?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Anything you want to talk about with this? This is
Yeah, but just to maybe to reminisce a bit about who Dina Koston was and her powerful musical personality and her perhaps idiosyncratic ways at times, is my understanding. Never having met her, but just heard about her.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that her reputation is still echoing through the years. And let me just say
Through
one
the
funny
jungles.
story. Yeah, because you're Hungarian, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, so
Well,
Dina Koston,
born from Hungarian
right.
parents, yeah.
So Dina Koston would rehearse her music, and she would become quite animated, and she would yell, "Ligeti, ligeti." Her point being that she likes Hungarian speech rhythms where the accent is on the first syllable. So don't say ligeti. No. You know that. You know better. Ligeti. I actually got to know Ligeti's son, Lucas. I did a recording with his then wife, who's a composer. So Gina Koston had a very particular. She heard everything in her head, and she marked her scores meticulously. Some would say she overmarked them, but she knew very much what she wanted. Really, what she wanted to do was she wanted to try to craft her performances, and so she wanted to work with her players. And then after she got to a certain point, she let it go, and she was happy. And she was an interesting person, a very interesting person, and I really love some of her music. This piece is quite interesting.
And Bill, you were there to kind of coach us and keep things, honest.
Did I perhaps say ligeti? I don't know. I should have if I didn't.
You did. And her music is gestural that way, isn't it? A lot.
She had a deliberate acerbity to her language, I would say. And she was at Darmstadt. She was a product of Darmstadt, and she studied with Luciano Berio. This is a huge subject, but she respected the Darmstadt ethos, and I don't know what she got from Berio, but she told me what she got from Berio, but we can talk more about that later.
Okay.
Sure. All right. Well, let's
so let's listen to the music, which is about a 6-minute work, dialogue, or what is the French?
Resonance éclat.
Resonance éclat. For 2 pianos.
Bravo, Dina.
Yeah, it's playful and engaging. But what was it like rehearsing that work, Robert?
Me for 1 second.
Sure.
Well, Joan, you can answer. What was it like rehearsing it?
Well, the name dialogue is very apt because it really has this conversational quality. And actually talking about liggity, this sort of murmuring that goes back and forth, really hearing it again. I haven't heard it, for years. At one time I performed it quite a bit. And I mean, immediately back in Dina's world. And
oh, yeah.
Thinking of how that back and forth, that communication works.
That would be, I think, a really fantastic work to see live, to see that conversation taking place, to see all the nuances and subtleties and the back and forth. Because when you're hearing the recording of it, me not being familiar with the score, it's hard to understand how complex all the, interwoven lines are, how it really goes back and forth. And it's really great to listen to with headphones because you actually can hear a little bit of that in, spatially, what's happening as the sound moves around the space.
It's also much less, it's interesting listening to the recording because you have a perspective. When you're actually playing, it feels so much more percussive, because you're creating those huge sounds. And there's a certain percussive action in playing the piano itself and making that huge sound. But when you hear it together, the sounds blended, it has this rich resonance that I'm loving.
Yeah, it's a beautiful color, but I can definitely, it's very percussive. I mean, listening to it, some of the dynamics are just, it's hammering, it hammers at times. It's great. But also it doesn't. It has a beautiful contrast to it. It really, it'll come on strong and then it'll let you kind of sit in that space for a moment. And when you rehearse it, would you rehearse it together? Or how would you, what's the rehearsal process?
We tried to be together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
no, remember we worked one time at Peggy King's.
Yeah.
We rehearsed, two pianos. Yeah, it's and they do blend, although the pianos were the pianos were not of equal quality and resonance, but they did, somehow it worked pretty well that way.
Mm-hmm.
And mastered well, recorded well, mastered well. Yeah.
Yes, beautifully done. You're both very strong players.
That's
Joan,
so it.
Joan,
No, I have to say I played this piece before. I played it with Robert. I played it on 2 occasions, both at music teachers' sort of
conventions,
and at both times the people were somewhat angry with me for programming it.
Oh,
that was their response.
Were they worried about their instruments, you mean?
No, not at all.
Okay,
but it just the percussiveness of it was hard for them to deal with.
Well, it's basically a percussion instrument.
That's the way Dina was. She was uncompromising. She was a modernist, and she was.
Bill, talk a bit about Darmstadt. Maybe our viewers and listeners aren't that familiar with the school and its influence.
So Darmstadt is a city in Germany where Alex Ross and some other people have begun to draw attention to the fact that the United States, I think the CIA, supported Darmstadt because they wanted to encourage culture that was not nationalistic. So the international style was the alternative, an internationalism in culture that is now beginning to fall apart was actually a project of the US government. And our friend Milton Babbitt was part of it because the RCA synthesizer was sort of his baby. And so he was indirectly funded by the CIA because the CIA, the synthesizer was funded by the CIA. Peter, are you up on all this?
Not as much as I thought I was.
So Darmstadt, the internationalization of music was already going on because Schoenberg and Hindemith and Stefan Volpe and others from Europe came to the United States, and Stravinsky. And when they left Europe, suddenly they were no longer connected rooted in their soil. So this blood and soil music of the 19th century nationalist movement, Stravinsky was part of that early in his career. His music was very Russian. After the First World War, the neoclassicism was a move to an abstract space that was still European, but not so rooted in the soil. It was like a sort of uprooted European with some elements of nostalgia, especially when you look at Chrysler, who wrote these Baroque pastiches. So, and then Schoenberg came to the United States, and but even before Schoenberg came to the United States, he was distancing himself from European harmony and the European traditions because he felt that Europe was finished. The war had put an end to the whole civilization. Yeah. And so there was a deliberate attempt to create music that was absolutely new. But what Schoenberg didn't do was abandon structure and syntax, and it was, his music was quite persuasive and compelling, and keeps us with him. So after the Second World War, when the United States was managing the peace, some people think that that's one of the last things that this country had to be proud of, was the way they managed the peace. But I'm sure that even my perception of how that happened is full of propaganda and misinformation. But they were trying to push Europe away from nationalistic, because look what nationalism got them. Wars, it got them wars. And we want to go back to that now? Well, so right now, yeah. It's the first time really in 70 years in the whole post-war era that we're questioning this, and it's because of some, like, I'm a Cold War person, and so I'm an international, I'm a globalist, and I think you are too, Robert. Although there are problems with it, because there's dislocations, and when the factories move their jobs somewhere else, and then people lose their jobs in the United States, and that's disappointing and frustrating and troublesome. So there are problems that come with this. So Darmstadt,
back to Darmstadt.
Abstraction.
Back to Darmstadt.
There's a certain amount of abstraction, a certain amount of pressing ahead into the new, and
representing Darmstadt, representing globalism in terms of an international musical community.
The international style, yeah. There's an
and
article
language,
there's an article in the New Yorker, which I didn't finish, about Philip Johnson. He was a big proponent of the international style, the glass box, and I grew up with that. My mother was an architect, and I grew up in a modern house on a mountainside in Pennsylvania. It was a very wonderful house with all these interesting angles, and the thing about modernism in architecture was to explode the box, because a house is a bunch of boxes, and in music the box is sort of functional harmony, like the chord and the measure. And so in Darmstadt and 20th century modernism was about exploding the boxes also, like architecture, but also exploring new sounds and new harmonies and new ways of organizing them. And so Darmstadt comes out of that. No, I don't know what Darmstadt's like these days, except that there's this colleague of mine named Alex Lipowski, and we were in Korea together in 2008. And after he came back, he started this group called Talea, and they're enormously successful. They do concerts in Europe, and I hear rumors that in St. Petersburg, there are people lined up around the block. And Alex Lipowski took his group to Darmstadt. It's almost like an homage, like a pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain nostalgia about it now. So in New York now, there are these young people. Alex and also the Argento ensemble, Michel Galante, and they're bringing European modernism to New York. It also happened when Tristan Murail came to Columbia as a teacher. Tristan Murail, he was studying with Messiaen the same time that Klaus Auger was. Klaus Auger is the composer from Salzburg that he recently wrote for Cygnus. So these Europeans, I still need to get my mind around what's happening in Europe right now. But the reason why I have to confess to a certain pride that I'm really wonderfully and positively engaged with American composers like you guys, because I feel like we're onto something really beautiful here. It's clear. It speaks to me, and in Europe they're doing other things and going in other directions that are sometimes a little confusing to me. I don't know if you're following it all over there.
Yeah. The Europe, not very much. Just thinking about that, my center of gravity changed in that sense, moving out here. And if anything, it's been interest in Asian music or connections to Asia, Korea, Japan. As we together, Bill, produced that concert in Japan some years ago with Joan, a couple of events, but also the West Coast, getting much more conversant with what's, to some extent anyway, conversant with what's going on there. People like Sarah Cahill and her work, and delving much more into composers such as Lou Harrison, Henry Cowell.
I've become a big fan of Terry Riley.
I love Terry Riley. Sure. He actually spent some time in Hawaii. He performed, the first time I realized that Hawaii was kind of on the map for new music was, I think I was actually living in Santa Fe, and Terry Riley was performing at some concerts at the East-West Center at the University of Hawaii. And I want to say that was maybe in 2001 or 2002, but that's when I realized, maybe Hawaii actually has potential. It was before I'd ever heard of Ebb and Flow Arts. And I think that you had just founded the organization at that time, Robert. And I play Terry Riley for my daughter because she's a big fan of the solo piano jazz album. Which one am I thinking of? Why am I drawing a blank? The largest selling solo piano jazz album of all time.
Sarah Cahill has a lot of pieces that were written for her by Terry Riley. Is that it's not that one? It's something else.
No. He's thinking about
it's
the
a whole
one book. Rich loves it.
My brother's a big jazz guy.
Keith Jarrett was what I was thinking of, but Terry Riley's Harp of New Albion on the Justin toned piano, is a beautiful work. And that was, something that explores just a slightly different tuning system as sort of a conceptual structural basis, and exploring the keys played in distant keys from the tuning system. Right.
I've been working with Agustin Castilla Avila. He's from Spain, and we first met in Spain, and then he moved to Salzburg, and he's interested in tuning systems. In Europe, I sort of picked this up from Augustine. They say 12-tone equal temper. Well, that's been done before. So they're really interested in doing other kinds of tunings, and also on the West Coast of the United States in California.
Yeah. They certainly delved into the Asian scales and intervals. So
Well, that was something we talked
but
about, Robert, was the
yeah.
in your approach with the textures and the colors, your harmonic language, the whole tone. No, I'm sorry, the octatonic scale was something
Yeah,
we
the
talked a lot
octatonic.
about. Yeah.
Bill has discussed that as well.
Yeah.
Well, Lou Harrison uses it quite a bit in his guitar solo.
Uh-huh.
But it's very tonal. Has a tonic pedal, and so you always know how his octatonic scale is always sort of rooted in the low D tuning of the guitar. But what's really bizarre is hearing that piece played on a just intonation guitar. Octatonic is very much a equal tempered creature. You know,
Yeah,
it's because it's about dividing the octave: whole step, half step, whole steps, half step, whole step. Now, but there are just intonation octatonic scales. Oh, and I worked with Harry Partch. I played on the Harry Partch guitar, and I recorded a piece by Harry Partch with New Band when they had custody of the instruments, when they had they were what do you call it, curating the Partch legacy. And when I was in Salzburg last summer, a guy came from Washington State with the Harry Partch guitar, which I had recorded on, and I had a reunion with it.
Holy mac!
Wow.
So all of the anything but equal tempered composers there, I became a little bit of a celebrity because I played this guitar. And Harry Partch was very well received in Salzburg, and this young man is doing a good job of keeping it alive.
His book is incredible.
You knew Harry Partch a bit?
No, I worked with a guy named Dean Drummond. Dean Drummond worked with Harry Partch in California when he was very young, and then he got somehow custody of the instruments and was keeping the thing alive.
Now Emil Richards had collected them and put up. Partch lived with Richards and his wife for some time.
Oh, yeah. I never knew that about Emil Richards.
Emil Richards just passed away, but he had collected those or stored them, some of those Partch instruments. Maybe he was the one that gave them to Dean Drummond. Anyway.
Could be.
But anyway, we're gathering in this just, some relatively short time, the amount of the breadth of your intellect, Bill, the breadth of your experiences. You need to write a book, man.
Yeah, this is very exciting.
I want to write a book. I do want to write a book.
Good.
Absolutely. And I don't know where to start. Maybe before the quarantine is out, I'll get a start on it.
Well, that could be your, in the time of Corona project, chapter 1 or something. But anyway,
chapter 1, how to pronounce Theorbo. I had to research that. I thought Theorbo, what is this? What? I was like, it looks like a lute, but it's like a Frankenstein lute, and I'm like, what? Theorbo, okay.
And that's one of your instruments, isn't it, Bill?
Well, I think I have to come.
Yes,
I have to come clean about my Theorbo playing because
Oh.
I insisted on I asked one of my friends, David Clayman, to use Theorbo in his Herman Melville settings, and we recorded them. But my Theorbo playing was just not as solid as my guitar playing. So I'm a bit of I have to call myself a Theorbo fraud. But I used Theorbo in my Juna Barnes song, and I recorded them and performed them. It's really hard to keep track of those bass strings.
It looked like it. I was watching some performance because I haven't seen that, but I've seen other interesting stringed instruments like the. Have you ever tried your hand at a Chapman stick?
Oh, I've seen them. I saw one at a museum in Washington in the 70s. It would have not been very old when I saw it because it was invented when 70s, I think.
Yeah, right then. I mean, I think it was. I think it's only an electric instrument, and part of the way it works is, really high amplitude because all you're doing is just putting your fingers down and stopping, the strings at frets or whatever to play it.
Yeah. Another instrument that I play is the tiple. It's Colombian and it's a 12-string guitar, but it only has 4 courses. So the courses are like, they're the things that you play as a string. But like a 12-string guitar, it has 6 courses, but 12 strings.
Yeah.
The tiple, the Colombian tiple, which I have on loan from the wonderful composer Alba Potas, it has 4 courses. Each course has 3 strings. The first string is 3 unisons. The other strings have the fundamental in the middle and then an octave higher on either side.
Oh,
So it's like a ukulele, like the 4 strings, the top 4 strings of a guitar, but with octave doublings for the lower 3 strings. And the sound is really incredible.
oh, it's got to be such a beautiful full sound. Makes me think though, you've been to Hawaii several times. Are you much of an ukulele musician yourself?
No, but I have students at Sarah Lawrence and I teach them ukulele music. So ukulele has some really flashy stuff. There was a guy in the 20s who played really crazy ukulele. I forget his
There's
name.
one here, Jake is out here now, right? Peter?
Yeah, Jake Shimabukuro. Yeah, he's super flashy. I mean, he kind of brought the instrument really into the forefront, I think, of popular music too. But people love it because it's so portable. So a lot of people just take their ukuleles around everywhere, you know. And, you know, you can play it at the beach. So that's even more fun.
And my son at the moment is into Velvet Underground. And what's the name of the woman? Didn't she play some ukulele? The woman, Nico.
Nico, yeah.
She may, maybe, I remember her playing ukulele, but maybe I'm mistaken.
No, you're probably right. They, you know, Velvet Underground, I think anything with Lou Reed, they were doing some fun stuff, some weird stuff. I don't know. It probably wasn't quite as popular then when they were recording.
No.
It's really big right now.
Yeah.
And mandolin as well. So mandolin, so say it again, that the groupings of strings like in a 12-string guitar or in a mandolin are called cases? Courses, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So mandolin has 4 courses and each course is double strung. So the mandolin has 8 strings and it's tuned like a violin. And those strings are in unisons. Mandolins are in unisons.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love mandolin. I used to say, if you want to make me love a piece, put a mandolin in it. And Robert, thank you. You took my.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So now you're, Bill, you're a poemus harmonica. How many are there?
Just one so far.
Just the one. Okay.
I should write lots of guitar music because I know the guitar so well.
Yeah.
So thank you for commissioning this one. And
we recorded it in haiku, as my recollection, it's about 2 or 3 minutes, or something like.
Yeah, it's very short. 3 minutes. Yeah.
3 minutes. You know, years ago we, speaking of again about the late Charles Warren, and we hosted him at the Noise Museum. That was where you first played.
Right,
in our
86,
ensemble.
yeah.
That this was a NOYES in southern New Jersey, beautiful museum, and it was at that time we maybe asked him to say a few words or before the pieces, and he said he declined. He said the only thing that should be said before a piece is played is its duration.
Yes,
which makes a lot of sense. You know, you want to let the audience member know, okay, is this a lengthy endeavor to just dig in, or will it go by pretty fleetingly? But otherwise, not too much. The music should speak for itself, he used to say.
So poema harmonica, about 3 minutes long. All right, let's check. We'll check it out. I'll put it on now. Let me make sure that I'm sharing the sound. Okay, we're all set. So that was recorded in haiku on
Beautiful
Maui?
piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cannery there.
Oh yeah. At was that at the Inside Out Universe studio or something like that? Is that the one?
Yeah.
The
It
that
was
funky
down the hill.
space is.
John Messersmith.
Oh yeah. Sure. I know those guys. They're all great performers too. The folks who kind of work with that studio.
Yeah, down the hill from Makawao.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's a great little space there.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a piece that we talked about reflecting the tuning of the guitar and all, but and you talked about the diatonicism that's or 7-note collections or that are able to be used in other ways that we hadn't thought of, as you were saying. How far can music go? Where can it go? So you can take not necessarily the minor seconds and the major sevenths and the tritones and whole steps with major sevenths, etc. But one can delve into what had been historically significant collections and bring them into modern composition without becoming nostalgic or too reactionary or etc.
Yeah, I like the way you describe that. This piece is probably the last time I'm going to ever use the augmented scale and so blatantly.
Never say never.
The augmented scale is like it's an even smaller world than the octatonic world. It has only 6 notes, and the octatonic scale has 8 notes. The augmented scale alternates semitone.
You mean the whole tone scale?
No, the augmented scale.
Oh, okay. Semitone minor third.
Scale. Yeah, semitone minor third. Semitone minor third, semitone minor third, and it goes. It's what Milton Babbitt called the E hexachord, I think. Schoenberg loved it because it was all combinatorial, and it's a very closed universe, and it's a scale of limited transposition. So I was experimenting with that here. But the
as in the Messiaen modes of limited trans.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
I imagine Messiaen knew about it, but it's not as famous as the octatonic scale for some reason. And it's a different universe altogether because it has major 7th chords, basically major 7th chords modulating by major thirds. It's actually the background of Brahms' Opus 88. Brahms' Opus 88 is an augmented scale. It's an E hexachord for sure. And that's a really interesting piece.
So it would be hour 3 in the tone clock.
Is that right? Okay. Hour 3. The tone clock.
Well, the tricard, the one segment, the 3-note segment would be
015.
Yeah.
Or 045. Yeah.
014. Oh.
014 is also in the scale, right?
Okay. But so that's it then. Somehow my impression was you had more of those, or you were at work on more. There should be more.
Yeah, there should be more. But I have to keep telling myself that people don't take you seriously if you only have short pieces. So this should become the idea of. There is another piece. I don't even know if I could find it because the computers die and I lose my work. The Poema Armonico, I deliberately used an archaic Spanish spelling, harmonic poem, it comes from a Baroque guitarist named Guerao. And he does these pieces. Each one is in a different mode in tone. He goes through systematically through the different modes, and they're quite beautiful and systematic. So they wanted to, so that what I was trying to do is recreate that Baroque guitar universe and that spirit of experimentation. So that's sort of where we are again. The ground has been taken out from under us, and we no longer have a way of composing. Everyone was making it up as they go along, and it's difficult, but fun and exciting.
Yeah, no wrong answers, right? So,
but also in this time when we are in between, perhaps a whole new mode of presentation of music live, and perhaps it's, as the Dionysian Apollonian alternates, we'll have to be kind of entering an Apollonian phase of common interests. We need to work together to keep music alive, to use a hackneyed expression, but we have to strike a balance now somehow. Who knows? But it seems like it's going to engender new approaches to all sorts of aspects of our lives, like the economic, the commercial, the consumer aspects of our lives, maybe entering a new era of some kind. And so music often is the harbinger, or is the avant-garde of what happens in the culture. So it's on us to.
I admire your positive attitude, and I've been reading Edmund Wilson, and he and Aaron Copland back in the 30s, they had some really angry words about American consumer culture. We're really not part of that. That's a different world, but that's the world we live in. We live in that world, and we do what we do despite that world.
Reverend Billy must be delighted. Do you know the Reverend Billy? He's the head of the Church of Stop Shopping, and he pulled all sorts of stunts over the years, including the first one that I saw was he went with a group of his, went into a Starbucks and attempted to exorcise the cash register got arrested. But he must be delighted right now.
Well, that's one aspect that I'm really enjoying about this whole experience, is that I don't feel compelled, like there's no pressure to consume anything, except for Netflix, I guess.
Home consumption is still.
It's refreshing. I'm getting used to it. Like, I'm sure that we've learned through this experience how not to go out for dinner all the time. And that's really an important step for us. And I've learned that my money just grows in the bank.
Yeah.
It just sits there, and I don't.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's crazy.
We're so conditioned to unload our and chalk up credit, debt on our credit cards, and we're so used to doing that, and now not so much anymore.
Well, I've had to reteach myself kind of how to cook. I mean, with a teenage daughter, my menu options at home are kind of limited, but after exploring the same, 6 or 7 meals for the last 6 or 7 weeks, it's kind of like, I got to teach myself a little bit more in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, Bill, we have another track that is Emil Awad's solo guitar piece for you, is my understanding, entitled Fuad. Perhaps you could talk about that, and you've introduced me to that festival he runs, the FIC 21 in Jalapa, Mexico. One of your many travels and contacts, and you've been there many years now.
Many, many years. I don't even keep track anymore. I like to be like the people who can't count past 3, because in terms of my actual, like I was telling my son, he shouldn't feel, in his head, I know he understands that he's quarantined in our house, but in his heart, he must feel ostracized. And I wanted him to own that. I said, you know, this will make you feel bad. I know in your head you understand it, but you're going to feel bad because he's closeted in the attic for another 2 days. It's the same.
After which he'll return.
Nag him.
Then we can hug on Monday.
On Monday. He's quarantined.
He's quarantined.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He came back from the University of British Columbia. So, yeah. So it's nice to acknowledge that we maintain a kind of non-mathematical reckoning in our lives. Despite our capacity to reckon mathematically, we also have a kind of like I learned it from my dog too. So many years in Jalapa. And last September, his student concert was so impressive to me because he studied at Harvard with Martino, and he sought out Mario Davidovsky and became friends with Mario, and he studied with Milton Babbitt as a high school student at Juilliard. And he has a great respect for this world of American post-Schoenberg. And he gets his students to write beautiful 12-tone music. So Fawad, it was a project that he started early on, and after the first year I was there, he said, "I'm writing this piece and it's for you." He called me out of the blue one day because I have a bit of a reputation for my work with Milton Babbitt's guitar music. I've recorded the solo piece and the guitar duo with Oren Fader, and then so Milton Babbitt has a certain reputation around the world, whether you like it or not, and actually it's not going away. In a way, I think he's right up there. People are worried about Carter's music, whether it's going to be continued to be performed, and Babbitt still has this following of the diehard admirers. And so Emil sought me out. I think Mario Davidovsky told him to call me because Mario went to Jalapa. And he wrote this piece for me. He was very excited about it. It employs flamenco guitar techniques in his own language. And his language is not a cookie cutter systematic language, but it's very much his own language. And I'm particularly find the intersection magical. This beautiful slow material in the middle of part of the piece, very well done. It's really beautiful. And then the outer sections are virtuosic and with lots of loud.
Oh, the flamenco comes through that. Yeah.
And Emil Awad, he's Lebanese, Maronite Christian background, I suppose. And Fawad is a family name. But it means something. What does it mean? I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's an Arabic word, and it's also a name, family name. So Fawad. Also, I'd like to mention that Emil's working on another project. Before Octavio Paz died, the great Nobel Prize winning Mexican poet, who got into a bit of a sticky situation with the Mexican government for being outspoken. Emil had a good sense of befriending him. It's a little bit like you befriending Merwin. You got to know Merwin a little bit there, right?
A little bit, yeah. Particularly around our common friend and my mentor, Edward T. Cohn. Right. Merwin knew Cohn quite well in Princeton when they were undergraduates, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Emil Awad sought out Octavio Paz and said, Paz is a really important writer. I've read lots of his books. I have them around the house, and an essayist, and he met Robert Frost and wrote about that. And so I think it shows a really good sense that Emil took the effort to get to know him and get permission to set some of his poetry, three sets of poetry. So he's working on
another agenda there.
Yeah, he's working on some settings for Vox and Flux of one of these Octavio Paz poems. And
Beautiful.
he's also already set some others for. So this is Fawad. You're going to play Fawad.
Yes. So this is a piece that was a work in progress while we were there a couple of times. You were working on it. You had given an initial performance, and then he probably worked on it, the piece some more, and et cetera, et cetera. But we finally got it recorded, and it's again, the duration is about 8-9 minutes, is it?
Yeah,
something like
that.
Yeah.
8:26 this recording, but you know.
Okay, 8 minutes 26.
Just to give the audiences the full disclosure. All right, here we go. Very, very cool.
Very,
Such a
very cool.
huge
Yeah.
range with that. Yeah.
Beautifully done. So glad to hear that after some time, but and the piece, beautiful. It's
Beautifully
amazing
done, yeah.
the resonance, the length, the sound, lasts. He takes full advantage of that, seems to me,
Well, when you
compositionally.
when you get the mic right up on the guitar, amazing things come out that you didn't know were there. And the guitar is a magical instrument. You know, guitarists just adore the guitar.
Yes, they do.
Peter, are you a guitarist?
I am, yeah. Well, I'm mostly of the Led Zeppelin kind of style. I grew up playing electric guitar, actually, so I never had a discipline for guitar in the classical sense. I played jazz, and I did play quite a bit of Balkan and Middle Eastern music when I was in college. So, but I was adapting it, so I wasn't playing oud. I was adapting some of that music to be played on electric guitar because I had I was young and I was developing a style.
You have a really amazing flat picking technique for that bouzouki oud stuff.
I was doing some of that. Yeah, I was taking guitar lessons from an oud player at the time. But the weird part is that although I could read music for piano, trumpet, violin, and some other instruments that I also dabbled in, I never learned to read music for guitar.
Well, I'm trying to teach my students how to read, and they're good sports. See, at Queens College, they have to learn to read because that's a serious classical program. But at Sarah Lawrence, I've been teaching at Sarah Lawrence since 1986, since I was a child. And I'm famous at Sarah Lawrence because I've had yearly contracts for 35 years, maybe more now.
Yeah.
See, I'm an adjunct. So I have no official, I'm a casual employee. They call me a casual employee.
Right.
Like with the janitors and the lawn care people.
So one of the most important roles there then, in other words.
So, but I love Sarah Lawrence. It's a wonderful place, and the students are often very interesting. And I try to teach them to read. But it's also interesting. I'm going to write a guitar book that sort of mixes fingerstyle with classical, because that's what I do at Sarah Lawrence. I trick them to do classical technique by teaching them fingerstyle, because the techniques are really the same.
I think it's wonderful. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your music and spending your wild and crazy New York Saturday night with us.
Thank you so much, both of you, for thinking of me and including me in your podcasts. And well, we gave it a good hour and a half, pretty much, and no, 2.5, almost 2 hours, over 2 hours. And it's been a great pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this, and look forward to seeing it when it's all.
Yes, we'll post it very soon after you check it out. And it was good to have Joan.
Yes, and tell Joan thanks very much too. And we didn't have a chance to say goodbye to her, but we'll make sure to post some links to your work, to your ensembles, to your interests when we post this podcast, so that our listeners can explore a whole lot more about what you do and what you're doing, and all the other endeavors that you're on top of, because I know that you're a very busy person with a lot to offer the musical community. So thank you very much, Bill. We can't wait to have you back here on Maui, sharing your talents and your compositions with us.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. And I look forward to the next time, and I wish you all the best with your creative endeavors, and hope things in Maui stay good. I'm sure they will.
Likewise for you.
And yeah, you stay well, and we'll stay in touch with all these projects, including the Korea project coming up. Presumably they're doing better in Korea than most places. And
yes,
although there was a recent uptick, in the nightclub district, they started to ascertain a cluster. But in any case, we're all involved with that, so we'll be in touch. We love you both. We really cherish the times you've been here, and we'll, depending on how things go, we'll work to have that happen again.
Well, much love to everyone and the whole extended family, and thanks again, Peter.
Thank you,
Robert. Okay.
All right, Bill.
All right.
Have a good
Thank you, Bill.
Ciao.
Everybody take care.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.